right, hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. So today we've got another Mustang Mach-E video, and I'm going to be telling you about a recent road trip I did with my Mach-E over to Grand Teton National Park. So let's go. So if you've watched the channel before, you might be familiar. I've actually taken the car there a couple times. This is the third time I've taken it there, and the second video I'm making about it. So I did a trip last year, last August, and then did a trip this year in September. And the trips were actually somewhat different. Mostly from a charging standpoint, so I thought it was worth actually making this video again. The trip last year, I relied mostly on Electrify America and also some charge point stations. This year, I pretty much relied exclusively on the Tesla Superchargers because there's some new chargers along this route I'll tell you about, and also some level 1 and level 2 charging. You know, just so you don't have to watch the whole video, one thing to note is there's really no charging in the actual park itself. There's a few exceptions to that. There is one level 2 charger at the Signal Mountain Lodge, but there's literally only one charger. I believe it's only 3 kilowatts, so it's not very fast. And that's the only one. You might be able to get lucky and be able to plug into a 110 outlet at like a cabin or, you know, at like a general store or something, but I wouldn't count on that. And then there's also some NEMA 1450s at campgrounds, but you know, the park has become really popular. So if you're there in the months when the campgrounds are open, where you could use the outlets, most likely those sites are booked. So you basically need to book a site to be able to really use those chargers. So I think I would plan on not being able to charge in the park at all, and try and charge whenever you can in Jackson. All right, so let me show you a Tesla Supercharger map, and there are several new chargers that have opened since last summer. So there are new chargers, and then as well as I didn't have my adapter quite yet. So there's a chargers that have been active for a while, and then there's some brand new chargers that were put in. So the brand new ones, there's a new one in Mountain Home, there's a new one in American Falls, and a new one in Blackfoot, all in Idaho. And then in the Rupert Burley area, there is some V3 chargers that are open to NACS. There's actually 2 stations there that are open to CCS to NACS adapter EVs like the Mach-E. There's also a new one up in the Sun Valley area and another new one up in McCall. I'm hoping to get to those here at some point so you can see those on the channel too. But I wasn't going that way on this trip, so I didn't get to see them. The Mountain Home one, I have a separate video, and that one's close enough to Boise where, you know, it really doesn't quite make sense to stop there for this trip since I'm leaving Boise at 100%. And then on the way back, it was nice to know if I didn't charge quite enough, I could hit that Mountain Home one for 5 or 10 minutes and have enough to make it back. So it was nice knowing that that was there. My Mach-E is a standard range, all-wheel drive 2022 Mach-E. And so it's dual motor, but the smaller battery. So it's a 70 kilowatt hour usable battery. So it's really the lowest range Mach-E you can get, you know, both from the smaller battery and from having the dual motor. So just keep that in mind if you've got a newer Mach-E in this configuration or, you know, the extended range. You know, all these percentages, arrivals, all that are going to be higher for you, which will be good because there was a few places where I was cutting it close. And then if you're in another EV, hopefully this helps you know which chargers are worth stopping at. Okay, so let's walk through the trip. So at the very beginning, I left Boise at 100%, and then I made it all the way to the Rupert Burley area. There is a new charger right at the Twin Falls exit. There's a new Flying J there. So that was going to be my kind of backup option if I didn't have quite enough energy to make it to the Tesla charger in Rupert Burley. I went for it, and so I arrived in Rupert Burley with 9%. So I left at 100%. I left with 9. I arrived at 9%. That's 152 miles. I reduced my speed to be able to make that. So the speed limit through there is 80 that whole way, and I was going somewhere between 70 and 75. And I was also doing some drafting when I could, and I had climate completely off. Not even fan on, climate completely off, and I made it at 9%. Great location there, right across from a Walmart. There's a couple other stores, places to eat, Panda Express, a couple other things around there. So it's a great stop if you can make it there. The other thing I'll note is I had one of my kids with me on this trip, so you'll note a lot of the charging sessions are pretty long. And so, if it was just me or like just an adult's trip, I probably would have maybe stopped, an extra time or something and charged a lot less time at each stop. But with a kid involved, it's like if they're happy, you want to keep going as long as you can, really. And then when you're stopped, they're going to want to run around and do stuff. So I basically did longer, deep charges this trip. Okay, then we got back on the road. So we left the Burley area with 95%, arrived at Blackfoot at 33%. So there I definitely overcharged, but we were busy doing stuff, going to Walmart and all that. So not a big deal. There you probably could have left at 80% or so, even in the standard range, and made it to Blackfoot. So I arrived in Blackfoot with 33%. Blackfoot's like 30-ish miles or so, kind of south of Idaho Falls. So I was a little concerned about that because it's like, well, I know there's not a lot of charging kind of once you leave the Idaho Falls area. So I was like, okay, I'm going to be in Blackfoot. So now I'm even 30 miles further away. Should I stop in Idaho Falls, get a little extra? I decided not to because the Blackfoot stop is great. It's a brand new charger. It's in a parking lot with a McDonald's right there with a play place. That's awesome. There's also a couple other places to eat, stores and everything there. So we actually ended up charging all the way to 100% there before we got back on the road, which that ended up being fine because we needed it. So we got to Jackson. My intention was to charge at that DC fast charger there, but both were taken. So I was like, okay, no problem. I parked in the space next to it, had the app notify me when it would come available. But I was with one of my kids, so it's, not super convenient to just all of a sudden drop what we're doing and get back to the charger and try and move the car real quick, or just sit there. Because, we've been driving all day, so you're not just going to sit there and wait for forever. Well, one spot did free up, but by the time we got back there, it was probably 15 minutes later, another car had taken it. So in that same parking garage where those chargers are, there's another level 2 charger. So I was like, well, we could just plug into that and get something while we're waiting. But my intention was at least to get back on that DC fast charger at that point, because we arrived in Jackson with 44%. Which is enough to get up into the park and come back to Jackson, but we're going to need to charge again before we leave Jackson. I was like, okay, we'll see what happens here. Well, missed the next person coming, and then there was an F-150 there, and some of the big trucks and stuff. Last year I ran into a Hummer EV there. And he was like, yeah, I need to charge to 90+%. This F-150 Lightning was like, yeah, I need to charge to 90+% because they're going to, remote places. And this is the only DC fast charger they can use for many, many miles. So I get it. I'm in the same boat. So yeah, Jackson charging, if you're overnight, you're probably going to be okay. If you're just passing through, be prepared to wait, be prepared to stay near your car, and be ready to plug it in when you can. Thankfully, those chargers are there. They're even free. Maybe they need to consider to start charging there because that might limit people from, charging really deep into their pack. But I feel like most of the time people were charging pretty high because they kind of needed to based on the infrastructure that's around or the lack thereof. There is a Tesla Supercharger in Jackson, but it's only a version 2. So, even Tesla vehicles, they can charge there, which is a huge bonus, but, they can only charge at 150 kilowatts. They're not getting max speed, and that station doesn't work for, non-Teslas. We got about 3 kilowatt hours out of the level 2. So we left Jackson with 52%. And then we were staying at Coulter Bay. So drove up to Coulter Bay, arrived there with 34%, which is enough to get back to Jackson, but it's like, man, we're going to be not looking too great trying to get back. Thankfully, the cabin we were at, the parking spaces were close enough to the cabin, so I was actually able to plug the car in overnight. Was able to add about 18 kilowatt hours, which was huge. That definitely saved the day on this trip, but My trip last year, the parking spaces were way too far away from the cabin and like on the other side of the road. So like even if you had a super long cord, like you're not going to run a cord across the street or where people are walking and stuff. And then we arrived back in Jackson with 46%. So we went from 65% back down to 46%. The DC fast charger was busy again. We were trying to get home that day, you know, and hopefully before my kid needed to go to bed. So it's like, well, here we go again. So I ended up plugging into a different level 2 that actually was a slightly higher charge rate. If you're trying to find a level 2, definitely shop around a little bit because some have more amperage than others. We got 7 kilowatts there. So we left Jackson with 57%. And I was trying to make it back to Blackfoot, back to that same Tesla charger we charged at on the way up. Wasn't quite sure if we were going to make it, but I knew there's the Electrify America in Idaho Falls, so I knew we could at least make it to that one. So I was able to stretch it a little bit, and I got all the way back to Blackfoot, and I arrived with 6%, which was cutting it a little close for me. And then had another long charging session there. So we charged all the way up to 100% there. Went back to Burley, so basically same charging stops both ways. Got to Burley with 40%, also left there with 100%, and then from Burley back home, made it back with 7%. Hopefully that gives you some helpful numbers. You know, I've got the table here that shows everything. But yeah, that first leg from Boise to Burley is a tough one between the speed, the elevation. Feels like the wind is always blowing the wrong direction for that part. That's the toughest part, I'd say, for the highway stretch. And then obviously kind of the whole Jackson issues with not much high-speed charging there is definitely a challenge. Overall, it was a great trip. Really love the Tetons, but definitely EV road tripping, that is a little bit of a challenge. Definitely a little bit exciting. You know, the one thing about all this is I pretty much don't get sleepy on these road trips because I'm constantly running those mental math calculations of how much energy do we need, you know, is the next charging stop or any stations broken, you know, what's the efficiency, you know, is there a truck I can get behind up here? Like you're just always kind of have these numbers going through your head. So it definitely kept me more, I would say, alert and awake. Shouldn't be necessary. You know, most people probably aren't going to want to deal with all this, but I find it kind of interesting and kind of exciting. So anyway, hope this helps. Let me know in the comments below if you have any other tips or tricks or things you've run into going to Tetons or other national parks. I would love to hear about that. Subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.